I wanted to chat with you on health in the United States today. But you recommended this book to me the other day, and I made it a quarter of the way through, so I'm not all the way done.
Yeah.
And I wanted.
It's called America and the Art of What's Possible.
Yes.
Art of the Possible.
Yep. So America and the Art of the Possible by Christopher Buzerk. So after reading the first quarter of that book, I quickly changed my conversation that I wanted to have with you to vitality in the United States today. And his opening narrative in the book was an extremely, in my opinion, masterful assessment of the definition of vitality. It was really, really good. But his assessment was, and you could tell based on the title, he's looking at America as a country, right? He's not like hyper focusing in on fitness or health or anything like that. He's just like, what does vitality really mean? So he laid out a couple ideas. Number one, decay is the default, right? So he's like, decay is the default. That is what's happening if we do nothing. We just all decay if we just kind of sit and we stay inactive, right? So this is like what you just mentioned on like the tail end, resisting entropy. So that's kind of what that is at the end of the day, right?
Immobility.
Like, everything in the world is going to decay if we don't give it a reason to not decay, to not adapt to having to survive.
Okay.
So that was idea number one that I pulled from that narrative. And then he said every nation is in a state of development or decline. And then this made me think very quickly, you're either growing or you're dying, right? So those two narratives really stuck out to me.
Or thriving or surviving.
Yeah. So those two things stuck out to me in terms of like, okay, what's inside of this idea of vitality? So he mentioned that term early in the book, and I'm like, okay, kind of went back and reread a few things and just wrote some notes down. So vitality, so the way that he laid this out is he judged by the private life of an individual, and again, because he's looking at this from like a nation standpoint, so the private lives of the individuals that live inside of that nation, and then the public life of that nation, so the connective tissue of that nation. So inside of the private life, he laid out a couple ideas. Physically secure in their own lives and their own property. If families are being formed,
I underlined that portion and had an autonomy.
Families are being formed and are free, generally prosperous. I think it was generally as well as relatively prosperous, because that can mean a lot of different things. So I thought that was important. So generally and relatively prosperous, self-sustaining. Okay, so as a people, you're not beholden to someone else outside of yourself doing something for you to survive to a certain extent. And if the families produce just enough children to sustain the population, those are like minimum requirements of individual vitality. So I'm going to roll through these. I want you to just bank these ideas because I want to hit them here in a minute.
You're doing a great job of reminding me.
And then the last piece on individual vitality was a worldview based on piety, and they have purpose, right? There's like some underlying purpose in their lives that drives them. Then he goes to public life, and this was really easy, right? Social cohesion. So that's where the connective tissue comes into play. It's like for us to be vital as a collective, so we'll just use his words and just say, as America, there needs to be connective tissue. And with that connective tissue, it's a feeling of being in it together. So when things are going really well, we can walk down the street, and even if we're doing it in our heads, we're high-fiving people because things are going well. But if things are going terribly, when we walk past people in the streets, we don't want to punch them in the face. We want to like hold on to them and just tell each other that everything is going to be okay. That's what I took from that. I'm putting words in his mouth.
No.
Social cohesion, feeling of being together, and we inspire one another, and sometimes we challenge one another to progress, right? To innovate, to create societal achievements, to say like, we did this and we're proud that we did this. Classic example, he didn't mention in the book, but classic example is like the space race, right? Where it's like how much freaking innovation happened when there was like there was societal cohesion. Everyone felt like they were in this together. A lot of other things were happening at that time, but there was just like this race to be like, who can innovate faster, right? A lot of arguments can happen or
Yes.
can occur on at what cost.
Yeah.
So I would like to get your take on 3 things. Okay. So I want you to think about these 3 things, and I'm just going to walk through some vitality stats in the United States based on what Buzerk laid out as a definition of vitality. So number 1, I want to get feedback on your definition or this definition of vitality. Okay.
Yep.
Personal. Personal, and as a unit. And then I want to understand your thoughts on where we are as a country. And then I want your thoughts on what you think we can do to improve. Okay, so just keep those things in mind. I'll repeat them. Vitality stats. So let's not even get into health stuff, because I think we can beat this up, and I think anyone watching or listening, they understand where we're at as a country. We're more unhealthy, we're fatter, we're sadder, we're lazier, so on and so forth. But let's look
Producing
at
less kids.
producing a lot. I'll get into that.
Okay.
Producing a lot less kids. So let's actually go to that. So birth rates. So let's look at birth rates since the 1990s. So I'll just go every decade. 1990, we were at 4.1 million. Okay, and the death rate was 2.2 million. Okay, pretty good. Okay, 2000, 4 million birth rate, death rate 2.4 million. Okay, so birth rate went down a little bit, death rate went up. 2010, birth rate 3.9 million, death rate 2.5 million. 2020, birth rate 3.6 million, and death rate 3.5 million. So that was the last reputable stat that we have on birth and death rates was 2020. So we ended at 3.6 and 3.5. So obviously we're at that spot right now where we're not vital as a societal unit, because we are in danger of not producing enough kids, right, to take care of our dying and older population. Because inside of this, it doesn't take into account out of the 3.6 that died, right, the ones that are remaining, what is the age gap between those? So our population is older and older and older over the last 3 or 4 decades. So that's something to keep in mind. So that we're not going in the right direction. It's going to take a lot of time to turn that around. Look at China. Prosperity rates, subjective, right? Like, I'm just going to talk about subjective pieces here. Relative cost to have a family, a home, and enough money to drop money into your savings account is a lot costlier right now.
For the next generation.
For the next generation.
Yes.
Kids are getting out of college right now, and at average, it's 10 to 12 years until they can even afford to buy a home, not a house, a home. So prosperity rates, let's say that those are not where they used to be. Okay, I think we'd all agree on that.
Yeah. Well, there's actually facts on that.
Yes.
For the next generation, Gen Z.
Yeah.
For sure.
Argument could be prosperity could be relative. You know, prosperity might be societal, it might be cultural, it might not have to do with my physical belongings and stuff like that, but
or just cash and assets, liabilities.
Piety. So this is more based on religious beliefs. 1990, where about 95% just believed in a God. Let's not say a specific God, but believed in a God. And in 2020, that was down to 87, which was higher than I actually thought it would be. So back to your thoughts. Thoughts on Buzerk's definition of vitality.
I think where I may get confused, not holding my definition of vitality, but is separating using vitality for the individual and then using vitality as a measure for a group or a collective of people.
Yep.
So I would say that, I do like, I did a lot of nodding, and I like the language inside of numerous parts of his definition of that. I heard words like self-sustaining. I heard in my mind, like, what you can do to live the largest life possible. So I think, said in different words, I think I agree with his notions of the individual vitality concept.
Okay.
Yeah.
So definition, solid.
Were there any areas in there
what would you add to that in your definition of vitality? And we can get into like fitness here?
My definition of vitality is, as aforementioned, or I guess this is another clip, but my definition of vitality is based upon, a person being able to continue to go after their maximum potential at every stage of their life. Maximum potential physically, maximum potential cognitively, maximum potential emotionally, right? What I may call cognitive and emotion, you may call spiritual, binded together. I want people having the ability to do that for the whole time, never overreaching at any point, never underperforming at any point for illness or whatever. It's just a non-stop onslaught against biological constraints. It's an onslaught against it. Basically you're trying to give a small middle finger to all those things that are telling you not to try harder and to do something more. Like every single day you wake up doing that. I don't know why I get emotional thinking about that, but
yeah, that's powerful. That's very powerful.
Because I think I do get emotional because I wish it for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I wish people could wake up to the notion, and it's apropos for the topic.
Yeah.
It's obvious. There's so many millions of people who, for whatever reason, just don't have that concept of vitality.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
Man,
so so that's my definition of vitality.
Yeah, let's stay on that just for a second.
There answers the question, all the other questions.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
How are things in America today? Man,
not good.
We don't need to. You and I don't need to remind people. Of that stuff. Like you said, it almost feels embarrassing to discuss it.
Yeah.
You can just imagine other intentioned listeners outside of this country listening in, right? How embarrassing is that? To me, I find that embarrassing.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm shameful around it, right? I felt like when you and I would do the kayaking chatter on America and the beauty, I'm feeling less proud of that feeling, and that sucks.
Yeah. Well, I think there's enough language and conversations around what's wrong, right? Like I think that we've come a long way in the past 4 years where people understand what the heck is wrong here, and if they don't, it's because they have blinders on. So let's spend time talking about, okay, what are the things that we think need to happen? Maybe it's on a macro level, maybe it's on a micro level, but what are the things that need to happen for people to move closer to your definition of vitality?
Yeah.
And that's a big question, I get it, right?
Yeah, no.
I think it's fun to kind of jam on that kind of stuff where it's like,
yeah, for sure.
What can we look forward to, James?
I guess I would first say that whatever has been going on is not the way to get to my definition of vitality. So let's just start by that. And then it kind of knocks out a whole bunch of things, right? Because people would say, we just need to have, intellectuals having, free speech debates back and forth on what is right for people online. How has that helped us, right? That's made people more divisive and, in my opinion, more stupid.
Yeah.
So it knocks out then
Can I hit on something there really quick? I think because it blends with what can we do possibly. I think that we've spent a lot of time trying to convince people of something that they already have ingrained in their head and doesn't actually mean enough for them to look at it critically to change their mind. Like I think that you hear terms like intellectually dishonest or intellectually lazy and things like that. Like I don't think most people are that. I think most people just don't actually care about these things enough to change their mind on them. They're just like, I'm going to go with status quo, and status quo can mean a lot of things, right? But I'm going to go with status quo, and this is where I sit on this. And a debate, evidence, receipts, Twitter files, text messages, whatever the case is, that's not going to change my mind on anything. A really good example of that is what we were talking about 3 years ago around the table and live a larger life on like vaccines and blah, 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 blah. That stuff just kind of like gone with the wind, right? It's like everyone kind of just forgot about that. So looking back at that today, for me, I'm just like, well, why is that? Like, why is that? Like, is it because there was so much of this that people got really emotionally involved in that conversation? And when we get emotionally involved in conversations, we're less likely to listen. We're less likely to look at it critically, less likely to change our mind on those things. So I think that bringing this to fitness, like, I think that the solution isn't to say like, well, you're dumb, you're doing this thing wrong, you're lazy, you're fat, you're blah, blah, blah. It's going to lead to these health consequences. Why don't you just open your eyes? Like, I think there has to be a different way. And I think that way has to connect with, and this is the difficult part, but that way has to connect with that person as an individual, right? Personally, like, right? And, that kind of wraps around to like how we've taught coaches to coach, right? It's like, build a relationship, get to know the people, get to know their strengths, their weaknesses, their needs, their wants, their success measures, all of those things, their priorities, their values, their beliefs, and then connect fitness to all of those. Like, I think that's the right way to do it, but in my head, I'm just like, how the heck do we do that at scale? Right? So sorry, I cut you off, but the like combativeness thing kind of made me think about that. Yeah,
well, the combativeness thing also made me think about effect size. Like, well, let's get down to, I think it's called brass tacks on like what we're actually talking about. And maybe I could use the book I'm currently reading that we talked about, A Brief Guide to Brief Therapy, as a stepping stone of what was said in there relative to answering your question. Like, how could we fix this? So let's approach the problem as if they were a client and you and I were a coach, right? How about we approach that problem by asking the question, well, why don't you clearly define what change will look like when you get to this utopic version of what you want for America? And I don't think, this is the thing, ironically, I'm tying it back in now, I did not like about Buzerk's attempt, which I've read many books similar to that. Nothing against him, admirable attempt. But the solutions are really poor, in my opinion. They never offer what I was just saying there, what coaches do to clients all the time, right? I'll give a layman's terms example, which will hit home for a lot of people, mainly people that are listening and probably in fitness. We say things like, we don't say it directly like this, but we say things like, how do you perceive yourself to be a different person and what changes are involved when you lose those 20 pounds? That floors a human, right? That makes a lot of people cry because they never were given the freedom to think about a self-evident, confident person of themselves, right? And the whole issue there is not that. The issue is we don't write out what we clearly want to have happen for America. We're scared shitless, honestly, or a lot of people are. Not in my mind, of course. I think I have a lot of the answers, but a lot of people are not willing to. So to back up and say, how is it going to fix that? I can tell you, whatever we've done is not going to fix that. Conversation, the intelligentsia, the current lack of awareness that we are evolutionarily mismatched, right? We're physical beings that are so in love with showing everyone, look how progressive and adapted we are to everything. You've adapted to doing nothing. You've adapted to sitting still, right? So to answer your question, how do we become aware of that? I think you and I, and a lot of people, need to clearly define what we visualize as a 95% effect size, meaning 95% of every American in 2043, 44, this is what it looks like. And I can tell you what that looks like as an idea, right? You have from 2024 till 2044, every child in every school across this country, regardless of their beliefs inside the school as to what direction it will be, that kid will come out being self-sufficient on exercise, fueling themselves, and how to think. Not what to think, how to think. Case closed, bro. Case closed. Meaning, like in 10 years, one of those kids are going to graduate. And, just so you use the fitness industry as an example, they're going to go into a Mountainside Fitness and just be looking around like, what are you doing? They'll see the old trainer just standing there looking around or reading his phone while the client is like doing bench press and he changes his weights and wipes his brow, right? And they're gonna be like, what is this world? But as funny, let's keep that humor going though, they're gonna be educated in school to be told this. Like they're gonna say, listen, when you get out there, you're gonna see 300 million really dependent adults who have not been educated, right? Who have not been educated on this is what ties us together. What was happening in 1940, 1950 in America, right? It's like, fucking figure it out. Figure it out, right? How do we figure it out? We better put minds together and do physical labor and innovate with things, and we come up with a fucking shuttle.
Yeah.
What I mean? Like so that's what it would take, I think, for us to, we need to visualize a truly effective state like we do with asking clients.
Yep.
What is that going to look like? I would just to raise all the patriots in the crowd, get you excited, get them excited. How do you want your country viewed in 20 years? When people look on the outside looking in, this is the embarrassment I told you about, right? I talk about, or the shame I feel based upon some things that were happening of the outside perception. How do you want that visual to happen? And if you feel you're not responsible for that, you got to change your mind on that.
Oh man.
You got to change your mind on that.
You said that, James, and I'm like, the first thing that came to my mind was I actually don't think a good amount of people care about that. I don't think a lot of people care about how they're perceived, let alone their country. I think it's in the like, aesthetic, from like an aesthetic standpoint, and from like I'm going to try to not use certain words, but from like a look at me, look how deprived I am standpoint. Like I think there's a lot of pride in that. There's not a lot of pride right now in like, look at how self-responsible I am. Look at how strong I am, and not in terms of like physical strength. I mean like acumen. I don't think a lot of people actually care about that. So if we were to poll and say like, how do you want people to look at your country in 20 years? And be like, I don't care. Like I'll go out and say this country sucks now. Like I don't like. What are you talking about? I don't care about that. I think a lot of people are really concerned with things such as how am I perceived, right? Like how am I perceived in terms of like, how am I perceived based on the things that I believe to be most important from a cultural standpoint? I don't know if that makes sense to you what I'm getting at there, but I think a lot of people care about that. They don't actually care about like the perception as the whole. They don't care about, quite frankly, I think they would disagree with a lot of the definitions that we've been talking about in terms of personal vitality. I think there's a lot of people out there that might say like personal vitality is actually not that important. Maybe even vitality isn't that important. Maybe it's like just being happy and being happy right now, not really having a great definition of what happy actually means. Or if they do, it's extremely surface level. So I think that's the issue, is the want. Like I don't know if the want's there, and I think it's hard to get people somewhere that they don't want to be. And that's where, we always have these conversations, James. And in my head, I go back to like, man, I just need to take care of the people that are closest to me and the people that I can actually grab onto and have an impact on and just have like interesting, challenging conversations with. Like I need to hyper focus on that. It's like, man, we're in the year, right? It's like, it's 2024 right now. What is everyone thinking about? What is everyone worried about? They're worried about the macro. They're worried about like a presidential campaign. It's like, worry about your block. Worry about your home, then worry about your block, then maybe go worry about your kid's school, then worry about like like maybe some like local election stuff that might actually affect you and your kids right now. Not saying that the big picture doesn't matter, but I think people just get so caught up in things that seem so far away from them that they then just don't care, right? They're just like, I can't do anything here. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm happy and I'm at peace and whatever the case is, right?
Yes. I agree with you.
So, sorry. And I don't want to be doom and gloom. I said I wanted to propose solutions.
That's my job. But I'll take the, just again to challenge the idea, not you, but the idea there that I think, you know, and to take responsibility. I think myself and you have the skills, though, to affect more than just that CCP coach that's going to affect 100 people in their lives. You know, I think we do have the skills and the ability to do that. And I think I picked up from what you're saying there, you may not have said it that way, but I do think we can, I think we can move towards, so it's a combination of defining the vision for 20 years and being super clear about it, right? Which could be a book, right? It's not like a paragraph. And then, the hyper focus, right? What I meant by that is that whatever retort that person will have that you just thought about, right? You and I have retorts all the time. I've had people come back at me with stuff that I was like, that's a tough one. Like, I don't know how I'm going to help you there. But I always came up with a solution with them, right? With them. So I couldn't help the avatar, for example, the person that, you know, screams about leave me alone, right? Individual rights and liberties, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and private property, et cetera, et cetera. I would be like, oh yeah? What do you mean by pursuit of happiness? What do you mean by that? And that person then gets you know, a pause. They're like, wow, I'm screaming, I want all these things, but I actually don't care. I'm really apathetic. Do you see that? But one by one, I think we have the skills to be able to recognize what this group of people wants and think of that group of people as one of our clients, right? Like, let's just because it's probably get us, you know, some clicks, the gender ideology crew, okay? The gender ideology crew out there, you and I have skills to treat that crew as a human, with empathy, and to be able to go, well, let me sit in your shoes, give me some reasons to sit in your shoes, and let me sit in your shoes for a bit, and then I can come back and provide like some challenging things for you, right? But you see, we do that all the time with clients, right? So why can't we do that, i.e. you and I, with large cohorts of people, right? It's just this is the thought process of like getting there.
We just need.
But I'm agreeing with you. I'm fully in agreeing with you. Reality and.
I think we need a lot of leaders, right? Like, because it takes leaders to do that. Like, there needs to be people.
Okay, this is great because I disagree with that. That's what I meant by the. Well, I'm not saying I disagree with it just because to disagree, but that's the vision is based upon, I guess, more radical activism, right? It's a bottom-up approach.
We might be disagreeing on maybe the definition of a leader. I just mean someone that's pushing the vision forward. So,
then
my next door neighbor.
Yeah, we need 20 million leaders who are 5-year-olds. Exactly. That's what I meant. So we're agreeing
it's like what we tell our kids, right? I'm sure you tell your kids this all the time as well. It's like, whenever you find yourself in a situation, just make sure that you identify yourself as the leader in that situation, because you are armed with the skills, I believe, to make good decisions, right? Based on the conversations that we've had. Your friends might also be armed with those, but I can't be confident they are. But I know that you are. So when you find yourself in these situations, I need you to step up and be the leader. And when there's a bad idea, you need to combat that bad idea and not just fall in line, right? That's what I mean, right? Where it's like the 5-year-old Carson can be a leader in his first grade class today, right? That's what I mean by we need leaders pushing the ideas and the vision forward. Not so much like
I'm in agreement.
We need like someone,
Yeah.
at the top.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
not
Okay.
that. Yeah, we need 20 million liters, to your
Yes.
point.
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah, that was good. I
Yeah,
like
I think
that.
we got somewhere there.
Yeah,
In my
yeah.
brain I did anyway,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
appreciate it.
Yep.
I'm always interested in getting pulled back from the void.
Yeah.